Hello. Are we on? Yes, we are. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. If you did join my first session, that was about the more, let's say, common end-user things of Windows 10, new features. Now we're focusing totally on security. It's too big of a part of the presentation to have it included in an hour, so we'll take another hour to go through with this. If you didn't join my first session, my name is Sami Laiho. I'm Windows OS MVP. Do anything with anything relating to operating systems or Active Directory or security. Been doing this for about 20 years now. If you want to follow me, please do follow me on Twitter. It's always fun to talk about Twitter when I'm in Scandinavia because people from Norway, Sweden and Finland usually think of Twitter in a bit different way than people in the US might. When Twitter first came out, for me, I didn't like it that much. If you can send a text message of 140 characters electrically to another person, that's something that people in the Scandinavia did with mobile phones about 30 years ago. So it's not that surprising. But actually, it's nowadays easy to say that it's probably my most important tool anyway. Most important because Microsoft measures us MVPs on how active we are on Twitter, how much we tweet, how much we have followers and stuff like that. So it's kind of mandatory, but as well it's mainly for me it's working as a springboard. So it points me to things that I should actually be reading. And also gives me an opportunity to share my thoughts a bit quicker than writing blogs. So please do follow me on Twitter if you don't. I have a few of my own projects. I'm best outside of Scandinavia. I'm usually end up meeting people who have tried something which is called Vioski, which is a free replacement for steady state. My biggest competitor is sitting here. Probably why I met Mark in the first place. Mark Minasi has a steadier state, so you can go and try both. Both are free, so go ahead and try it out. Used by many cities and libraries in US as well. Anyway, there's my blog site if you need it. As those of you who came for the previous session already know, and those who have been to my sessions previously know that I always, wherever in the world I go, I start with the same thing, which is teaching you people some Finnish. So I've done this investigation myself, and I've ended up with a number of 1 to 7. It even adds up here, because it's 1 to 7, meaning that whenever other languages, for example, English requires 7 words, Finnish only require 1. So we save a lot. When we're talking about security, it gives us other additional benefits as well. But let's take an example. So even with his inability to organize things, that's said in English. In Finnish, that's a lot easier because it's epäjärjestelmällisyydelläänkään, which is like a more compact way of saying the same thing. That's not by far the longest word that I can come up with. So that's a short one for me. As you can see, if we're talking about security, this is because I've been asked to talk about Windows security. In Finland, everything works differently because we don't need any BitLocker. You wouldn't understand anything you read on my screen anyway. We honestly don't use passwords. We just change them the other way. We have a guy here in the front row wearing a cap that I gave to my audience in some conferences. It has the word word administrator in the Finnish UI, which is järjestelmävalvoja, and that's why we don't need any passwords, because we can just make people try to guess the user ID. That's a lot harder than guessing a password. So now you know a few basics. If you do projects with Finnish people, you understand why they work like this. If we're gonna go to the topic itself, first, there's something, because I've been to Norway quite a lot now, so been teaching here. I'll be teaching here in, I think, like 3 weeks or something for a Windows internals course. And this happened in Oslo. so I can't help mentioning it here. If you've seen my session in TechEd Europe, you've seen this already because this happened just the week before TechEd Europe. So the human factor. Before we start talking about technical stuff in security, we have to talk about the human factor first. What happened in Oslo? I'll tell you a story. You can listen to me. It's the same thing as it's on the slide because this got recorded. I want it to be there as well. Anyway, what happened in Oslo, just about a few hundred meters from here. I went to a hotel, checked in, got a key, went up to my room on the 6th floor. Key didn't work. Went down, got a new key, went up to the 6th floor, key didn't work. Then I started to get a little annoyed, went down, said it's still not working. They said you don't have to get it working now, so I'll come up to you, come up with you because it's probably not just charged. So they need to recharge the locks. So he took a charger with him, came up and charged the lock and tried the key, and it didn't work. So then he said, like, you have to get settled in. It's not your problem. So you get in your, I'll let you in your room. You get settled. And when later on during this evening you come downstairs, you will get a new key. So I went downstairs at midnight. And there was a young girl working alone with huge amounts of people asking for different stuff. So she was alone there and really busy. So I asked her. I was asked to come here and get a new key. Can you give me a new key? She gave me a new key. I went upstairs on the 6th floor. Key didn't work. Went downstairs and said that honestly it's still not working. But you know, my key is like really thin. It's a different material. It's really thin. But your colleague used a more thick plastic key. So I think it's a contact issue somehow. So I think I need a thicker key. So could you make me a thicker key? And she said that she doesn't know, but she'll have to check from the back room. She went to the back room, came to me, gave me a white plastic key, and out loud told me, here's the key, but you can't tell anyone because it works on every room. That's the human factor in Oslo. Sorry, can't help myself. So there I was, thinking about it, okay? I honestly, I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything. People have been asking me later that, why didn't you tell her what she did? And I couldn't, I honestly couldn't. I was so shocked. I took it. Then I was thinking like, should I just play a prank and start going into rooms like, oh, it's taken, sorry. Oh, you're already here. Sorry, I'll take another one. But anyway, then I went back upstairs and I was thinking, if I tell this, the girl will get fired. Or should I just go and tell her what she did and we'll try to figure something else out? And whenever you don't know something, you have to consult. Still a few years ago, I used Wikipedia a lot. Wikipedia has great knowledge in it, and I even paid for the Wikipedia payment yearly. You know, the voluntary, give us $20 to keep it running thing. So I paid it. But since 2 years ago, I haven't paid it because I got married. And now my wife knows everything. So I don't need Wikipedia for anything anymore. What I do, I call my wife instantly. You're my moral anyway, so tell me, what should I do? Am I acting like a professional on this security thing and try to fix this issue by contacting someone higher up the ladder? Or will I go down there, save her job, and forget it? And my wife told me that I think the girl just has to find a new job. Fine. So then I took a selfie of myself with the card and sent it to the CEO of the hotel chain somewhere in Europe. And it took about 30, I wrote them a message like, hi, I'm here up in your hotel in Oslo. I'm sitting in a room with a master key to 298 rooms, if your website is correct. How should we do this? And it took like 30 minutes, someone knocks on my door. We believe there has been a minor security issue. And would you give me the key back? I was like, yeah, I'll give you the key back. And then the country lead of Norway called me after midnight. She was woken up, so she called me and we decided to have a security meeting the next day. And we had a security meeting going through the hotel chains, different security trainings they have, and they were promising to take this as an example. There were 2 big security flaws, so 2 people actually got, well, I usually say fired, but as I believe that Norway is as horrible as Finland in a way that if you would really need to kick someone out, it's not that easy. So I think she probably didn't get fired, or did the manager. So the 2 security flaws were, contractors had been renovating the hotel. They had finished the day earlier, so they left the key after finishing the renovations. They left it there. Their security policy states strictly that these keys will have to be destroyed instantly by the manager. So now the manager had left the key there. And it was this young girl who was actually only trying to help me, give me good service as a customer. And she took the key and gave it to me, which was the number 2 fault. So it actually went up the ladder, and I don't know what really ended up happening. Only that the next day we had the security meeting, and the lady who was the country manager really knew how to play it, because she asked me, how would we keep you a happy customer of our hotel chain? I was like, I believe in good karma, no worries, nothing is needed from your side. I'm happy that you are taking this seriously. And then the point where she knew how to play it was, what about your wife? Well, my wife might appreciate something. And then we got a free weekend in any of their hotels in Europe in a suite. So now we still haven't used it, but anyway. So we did get something out of it as well. Anyway, I don't want to be only talking about Norwegian people, because this is like the setting here is quite hard, me against you, most of you. So I have a Finnish example as well. This was on the news just before Tech Europe. They're trying to build a new shopping center for cars. So like 16 to 20 different car brands selling their cars, like a big mall, but selling only cars. They're trying to build it, and it would cost 150 million euros. But now it got stalled because the guy who's running the show actually couldn't come up with the money. And it said all around the newspapers, they told that it's shut down because there's no money, and suddenly newspapers are all full of the story that no, it's on again. Now they have the money. Because CEO of this company has gotten an offer from a man in UK to transfer 30 million euros to him to fund the project. Not just any man, because it's actually from Regina Chilupa, who's the widow of a former Zambian president, Frederick Chilupa. CEO sends 336,000 euros to fund the transaction of the money. Luckily in Europe, we do have this thing that will check out money transfers. So his transaction is instantly frozen as a security measure. He gets his money back, and what does he do? Sends it again. That's where we are at right now. So it's now the newspapers are talking what's happening next. That's amazing. Okay, so that's the human factor. The world is changing a lot, so I'm talking about proactive security all the time, and I try to talk to everyone about proactive security. I'm actually writing a blog series about running this computer while I'm traveling. I'm traveling. I'm 5 weeks in Finland before summer, including January. So I'm all the time traveling around. And that means that I'm on wireless on all different airports. I'm on really unsecure networks all the time. Still, my computer has no anti-malware. Actually, I've had to done a scheduled task to keep the freaking Windows Defender off, because it just keeps coming on all the time. But I'll have to do extra measures to keep it off. I'm also running no firewall. I've got all ports open. So it's just an experiment. I have to do anti-malware scanning for the guys who are paying me to do the blog series, so that I can prove weekly that I'm still uninfected by a certain amount of different anti-malware engines. But what I am using is something that is the reason why I'm not afraid at all. Well, I'm not afraid at all because I'm using no admin rights on my computer, and I'm using BitLocker. So I will, by hand, pick up every single piece of software that I'm going to run. And even more important, I'm running IPsec all the time, meaning that although all my ports are technically open, I'm not talking to anyone who doesn't authenticate with a certificate that's from my trusted PKI. So I would say it's more secure than the reactive security that a firewall and a network inspection service and anti-malware would give me. But it's a very good example on proactive against reactive. Biggest companies like in Finland, that would be F-Secure, worldwide maybe CA, Symantec. People are saying publicly on newsletters that their products will not be able to protect you in the coming years. They wouldn't say out public. If you think about it, that's like Microsoft saying that Windows 10 won't work and put it out there publicly. So it's something that it's not that easy that they would be just out there willingly saying that. But they have to, because that's the truth. There's no way to do only reactive protection. We've got too many threats to fight against. We're always relying on fingerprints and stuff like that. Or yeah, there's a 1% of like heuristics and stuff like that. But anyway, we're mainly trusting that someone else has already faced the threat. You can do proactive security totally wrong. AppLocker is a perfect example. I did an AppLocker implementation for the city of Helsinki in Finland. When we started to do AppLocker with them, they had the old one in place. We had 8,000 lines to administer. 8,000 lines of accepted executables that they were running. I took the list out of the policy, put it to Excel, and used find duplicates. And it only had 2,000 different applications. But it's every single app is there for 4 times, because it's like common knowledge for the help desk people that it might not work because of this list. So they keep adding it there. The same environment with 500,000 users, 35,000 workstations, about 400 servers is running now with 14 lines of AppLocker rules. So there are totally 2 ways of doing it. One that's horrible to manage, quite unsecure, and the correct way of doing it. So it's not easy, I'm not saying that. Even AppLocker has holes in it, so it has to have some exceptions to the rules to work. But if you are into that, check my TechEd presentation on Channel 9 from TechEd Europe. It's there, the AppLocker thingy is presented there. Now one question that always comes to mind when we're talking about Windows 10, especially for the past few months, is that is it safe to use Windows 10 for testing? Microsoft is now telling that you should be using Windows 10 to run on your main machine. Not a test machine, but your own production machine. There's something that they call Project Asimov, which is a way of collecting data from the Windows insiders who use Windows 10. So now that's a topic that people are discussing. Is it the Windows 10 itself actually who's collecting the data? If you read the end user agreement, it does actually state, the privacy policy there states that your name, email address, preferences and interests, browsing, search and file history, phone call and SMS data, device configuration and sensor data and application usage can be collected. So now they're talking about if it's secure to use Windows 10 itself. Of course, they are saying that this is not used for anything else but to make a better Windows for you. I'm one of the guys who actually believes that it's better to take telemetry information rather than not taking it, so I'm okay with this and I'm still playing with Windows 10. But it's always I'm saying this mainly because I do security for work, and now I'm talking to my customers, and I seem to be in a conversation all the time that when I start talking about it, someone in the room who thinks is extremely wise and knowledgeable will ask me, what do you say against this? So it's just good for you to realize that you actually, at least if you haven't read any, well, people always read the license agreements and stuff like that, but if you would be the one who didn't, then you have at least read this. There was a virtual CD software. You know, you can take an ISO file and use it as a virtual CD. That was the funniest thing they did. They had the download cost $9.99. People downloaded it. And then after 3 years, I got a newsletter. That's the newsletter, excuse me. The newsletter said that after 3 years, we are happy to tell you that we have had the first customer ever to read our end user license agreement. Because at the end of the end user license agreement, there was actually a note that you can download it for free if you read this far, and here's the link. So they were actually able to prove from the web server logs that someone now downloaded the free one. So someone had read it. 3 years. We all know this, but anyway, still remember that if you take security seriously, you should also take seriously of the stuff that we're talking about now and read what you are willing to do with the operating system. As you can figure out, I'm not a Microsoft employee, but I'm not saying that's bad. I'm saying telemetry is good. But please be sure that you can talk to your customers, because they will try to make you look bad because of stuff like this. One thing I want to fix now, because I made a big mistake in TechEd. I'm not taking the blame. I don't shoot the messenger thingy. I was talking about BitLocker. And something that they promised that would be in Windows 8.1 actually never made the cut. So a very, very important thing concerning BitLocker hacking. Now, one of the easiest ways of getting a BitLocker key is to use any sorts of media that can use DMA, direct memory access, and then you just steal the key from the memory. So DMA is a built-in feature of, for example, FireWire Express cards and Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt, of course, being by far the most scariest one because of its huge speeds. So you can use those to access memory directly, meaning that you can read the BitLocker key, which will be in the memory, and you can hack the computer by that. They've done all sorts of measures to prevent this. I've never done a single BitLocker implementation that didn't block FireWire and Thunderbolt by group policy. I always block them. But it's still, the problem itself is not solved, because you can always have a new kind of DMA device. It's really hard to do a policy. There's the military way of doing this policy in Finland. Military way of doing this policy is you put the policy that says that do not allow any device to run if it's not on the list. And then you do a white list of devices. But if you do that for, now think about bring your own device thingies. Like, come on. That's not that easy to manage, okay? So they've been trying to block that. Now they were supposed to fix this in Windows 8.1, which was a feature that Microsoft security guys were really proud of, and it meant that as long as your computer is locked or locked off, no new DMA devices will be accepted. But as it sadly says on the slide, I was wrong telling this at TechEd, because actually it didn't. We did figure out later why our tests, because of course we tried at least to test it out to show it, but we did find errors in our testing as well. So lessons learned, yeah. But now in Windows 10, we've tested it again, and now it actually seems to work. So small thing, but it made a big, it actually made a big, it was a very important step for people who were trying to decide if they run BitLocker with Windows 8.1 without a PIN code or without a password or without a USB key. And it was a important piece of a puzzle to make BitLocker secure. And it's sad that it actually wasn't there. So now it's in Windows 10. And I'm going to test it quite often until they have the final build. Because with Windows 8.1, it was in a build, but not the final one. We got a question?
Yes. Will this blocking also extend to PC cards, which registers as DMA devices?
So the question was, will this extend to PC cards as well? Yes. And that's an important one. If you haven't seen how you crack computers, you just go to, for example, windowscope.com. I always show this because the price is ridiculous for both poor and rich people. I hope we have a working internet connection here. Yes, we do. So their products, for example, these are used by different agencies, so they're Actually, they got, if you check out these guys' references, they're cooler than others. Because not that many have references like NSA, CIA, FBI, anything with 3 letters. So, capture card gateway, access to locked computers. Plug it in a PC card and it opens. It takes 2 to 3 seconds and it's open, but it costs $5,000. But as I said, it's a ridiculous number for both poor and rich. Normal people wouldn't buy this. It's too expensive. It's horribly expensive. But if you think about an agency that's willing to pay $100,000 for a GSM decryption thingy, that's cheap as hell. So there's no price at all. That's like a nominal price that they have to have there to be able to say that they're selling something, if you talk to an agency. So the DMA thing is a really, really big thing. And this one works with the same thing. It uses DMA. I don't know how well you know how Windows kernel works, but this is the weirdest thing in Windows kernel, which is that there's a single bit that tells if the password is correct or not. You don't have to know the password. You can just change the bit to 1, and then you can use any password because it's right. Like, I really think they should come up with something a bit more difficult. But anyway, if you know the place where the bit is, or you can find it, then you can just change it to 1. And that's exactly what you do with DMA, because DMA is a two-way street. You can read memory and you can change memory on a computer. That's actually totally an ad hoc thing. I wasn't even going to talk about that, but there it was. Then when we start talking about security, first we have to, of course, talk about how we're authenticating our computers and how we're authenticating our users. So Windows 7 was the last operating system that actually used a very well-known and old way of authenticating computers, first against the domain and then authenticating users against the domain. Windows 8.1 came out with something new, as you could still do the same thing, but you could also use Microsoft accounts to authenticate your users. Microsoft accounts you needed to use if you wanted to get benefits with Windows 8.1, for example, syncing, settings, downloading stuff from the store, buying stuff, things like that. Now with Windows 10, you can use the old one, but you can also replace everything with Azure AD. So Azure AD authentication can be used so that you don't technically need a domain controller at all on your physical sites. So your DCs could be only in Azure, meaning that your computers would authenticate against Azure. You could authenticate by users using, you could authenticate your users against Azure. If you want to play with that, Azure Active Directory with the simplest form for administering users, it's good to remember that it doesn't cost anything. This is something that Michael Niehaus all the time likes to say and show everyone that he doesn't even have a credit card registered in Azure and he's still using Azure Active Directory all the time. You won't get the premium AD and stuff like that, but you can get the basic for free. Now what's great is something that almost all of my customers have been asking if they're talking about Windows 8.1, which is the ability to replace these Microsoft accounts but get the same functionality. And that's why I think this is a very important change. So you can actually do store access, settings sync, live tiles syncing, stuff like that. Use the store, buy your company's own enterprise apps, or buy from the store without a Microsoft account. So you can actually use Azure AD and take control of these things that were now only in the public cloud with Microsoft accounts. If we talk about something that's not yet in the builds, but the next project that many people are waiting for, which was mentioned in my first session as well, called Project Spartan, which is the new Internet Explorer replacement. The new browser is actually supposed to have quite a lot of security features. For example, HTTP strict transport security, which basically tries to make these man-in-the-middle attacks a lot harder to execute, works as a mitigation against those. It's Spartan is still something that's quite that we still don't have that much information from. So if you want to look at Spartan and also some mentions of the security, these slides will be available for you after the conference. So check my first session. That had a link when talking about Project Spartan, and it's a link to an article written by a technician from Microsoft, which is actually very good. I think it's the best article that I've found, with deep enough knowledge about how the thing works. Biggest difference compared to our previous lives is no more passwords. That's one of the big themes around Windows security. Microsoft wants you to never use passwords again. That's not easy to do. We've been trying to do a lot of things like two-factor authentication. For example, Finland tried to use smart cards a lot because they think that smart card readers would be something that's a normal feature on every single PC in a few years. It actually didn't happen. Finland put like 90 million euros for a project concerning these personal identification cards that had a chip in it. It failed mainly because, especially in the Nordics, people are using a lot of network bank account authentications. So you actually had already a way of doing a two-factor authentication, so it wasn't that easy to replace with smart cards. Smart card readers aren't on all computers. Biometrics. That's one of the ways Microsoft wants to solve this. This is pure speculation, but if you ask me, will there be a new Surface Pro version quite quickly? There has to be. Surface Pro 3 doesn't have a fingerprint reader. It's one of their biggest themes in the whole operating system, is to change to use biometrics, and their best-selling device doesn't support it. So I'd say there must be a new one, quite quickly. Oh no! I did not like biometric. I'm sorry. I think it's Friday. No, it's not even Friday. It's my last day here, so it's Thursday, okay? Sorry for the bad joke. I apologize already, but I still have to show you this. I think I might have mentioned it before, but I have biometrics on my machine. And I haven't been that happy with the biometric stuff. I haven't really used it that much. But now I got a new machine, and I'm super happy. In a few weeks that I've had the machine, I've changed my mind. I will never, ever buy a machine again if it doesn't have fingerprint reader. Because I'm talking to everyone all the time about running only limited user accounts. So now that I'm normally running as a normal user, I do need admin access on my computer quite often. But what I used to do before was that I was trying to run a command prompt. Okay, now I don't have enough permissions to write to the hosts file because it's not elevated. So then I had to do stuff like run as, shift right click, run as, run different user, stuff like this. And then type in my password. So what I ended up using was my local administrator account was always called Mr. A, because it's the quickest to type in. /A. You're really fast with your admin. But now with the fingerprint reader, that's awesome. Because now I just have a normal user finger and then I have an administrator finger. Sorry. It's a, you don't do this to end users. Can you install me a software? I can give you the finger. I apologize. Luckily they don't video this, so I dared to do it. But and it's not a joke. I honestly use it all the time. So command prompt, middle finger, do what you need. Hyper-V manager, elevate, middle finger, done. I'm like so easy using 2 user IDs. And I still have fingers left for different purposes. Enterprise admin, domain admin. So two-factor authentication for everyone. You use either a PIN code or biometrics as the first factor, and the second factor is something you own. This means that it can be either the device with its TPM, meaning that I take a new device like this, and then I will, for the first time, using a one-time password, OTP, for my computer, for example, against Azure or whatever, I'll do a one-time password authentication to enroll this machine as my trusted machine. Exactly the same system that you've seen with Windows 8.1 when you attach it to your live account, Microsoft account. Okay? So you enroll this machine. But that would mean that now the TPM is the physical proof of ownership, which is actually the second factor. And the other factor would be PIN code or biometrics. What happens if I get another computer? I'll have to enroll again. So I'll enroll every single machine I have, or I'll use an external proof of ownership, which in this case would be Windows 10 Mobile. So what I will enroll is my Windows 10 Mobile as a trusted device, and then using Bluetooth or maybe wireless, because they're not really telling if it's going to work with wireless, but at least Bluetooth. It means that as long as my phone is within about 10 meters from my computer, this will be the physical proof of ownership. So I can use a lot of computers with my mobile phone, just walking from a computer to another, keeping the computer nearby my mobile phone. And then I'll use my PIN code or my biometrics. So you would never ever use passwords again. With Windows, of course, other places, yes, we will never, there will not be a day during our lifetime that we would get rid of passwords. That's of course for sure. If we get to log on to the computer, there's still something that might happen when we've already accessed a resource, which means that we've been given a token. And now the most popular way of trying to get into resources in company networks seems to be pass the hash or pass the ticket. Pass the hash attacks, pass the ticket attacks are things that can really easily, without knowing the password, give you the same access, because Windows has basically worked so that the local security authority, LSASS, will build you a token, and you get the token, and if you use the token, you can go to different places. But now we don't steal the password, we steal the token. Give the token to the place where we want to go to prove that we can access it. Now what Windows 10 does, which is super cool, I'll have to say, this again is stuff that we don't see in the current builds. But when I'll see it, if they can execute what they're promising, this is actually the most and biggest important change in the whole Windows 10 security. Because what they've actually done is that if you remember, before Windows 7, Microsoft started talking about something called MainWin. It was there on the news, but actually nothing came out of it. They were showing a few demos on running a web server on a Windows kernel that only took 32 megs of memory. And we have to remember this was the Vista time frame, so we were already talking about computers needing 1 to 2 gigs of memory normally. So they were talking about MainWin. Maybe part of the MainWin thing got introduced in the new kernel of Windows 7, as it was the first Windows ever that had a 2-part kernel. Kernel base and the normal kernel 32. But even more, the MainWin is now like introduced as a virtual machine inside of every Windows 10 box. So Windows 10 will be running Hyper-V, and on Hyper-V there will be a virtual machine, which will be running something they call MinCore. The MinCore itself will house the LSASS process and all the tokens that it creates. This means that now that here in the front row you were asking about PC card or PC Express or stuff like that, things that have DMA. You can get kernel level access to a Windows box, but it doesn't matter. Because when you compromise the box below, you have no access to the kernel of MinCore. You have maybe gotten access to the base OS, but there's no DMA for MinCore. MinCore can only do few functions, and it can only do functions usually one way, meaning that it can ask, for example, does the token of a user allow him to do this? And MinCore will tell yes or no. But it's like a ball which houses the tokens and the process creating the tokens with no access inside. You can ask questions, you can put anything there. Now the question that I ask, and I haven't gotten an answer. Will this mean that to run MinCore, you would need a Hyper-V, which in Windows 8.1 client meant that you would need SLAT, S-L-A-T, and a processor that was x64, 64 meaning 64-bit Windows, meaning minimum of 4 gigs of memory. You remember there were a lot of requirements for Hyper-V. What happens to the people that run Windows? You know you can download Windows 10 x86. It's there on the download side. So what happens to those people? Will Hyper-V now suddenly, this would be an interesting question to ask the guys who are talking about how Hyper-V is working differently in the server vNext. Because honestly, is this, and will they say that MinCore technology will only be available for users that are running Windows machines that can support Hyper-V? That's something I don't know. Something that Microsoft hasn't disclosed. What will happen to the x86 that can run Hyper-V? Or has Hyper-V changed so that Hyper-V can run with the more limited specs? Which of course would be great because it can do it on a server, but not x86. So that's something that's totally open. I have no idea how they're going to execute that. So MinCore is, if you ask me, that's the coolest thing. It's technical and boring now because you can't see it in action. But on paper, looks like the biggest change. What happens with moving data? So BitLocker is okay for protecting stale data. So data that is resting currently on your hard disk, that's protected by BitLocker. You have other measures to prevent hacking of BitLocker, so your data is quite secure as long as it stays on the disk. But what happens instantly when it gets off the disk, when it's decrypted every single time, and then it's, for example, sent out to the network. So that's the place where something that Microsoft introduced called Enterprise Data Protection, or EDP, which they said is just a name for now, might change if they come up with a cooler name. EDP tries to solve this. So you have policies which are there to prevent accidental leak from companies. So when the data leaves the computer, it gets protected automatically. There are rules. So for example, the policies can state that these network segments are our company network. So whenever you get data from the company network, by policy, it needs to be protected. That could mean encryption, RMS, it could mean both. That could also mean that if it comes through a VPN tunnel, that could also mean that if you're using a mobile phone, as it's not that easy to talk about networks, it might be that it's either through a VPN, or the thing is that they're also supporting a new Save As dialog. So there's even a manual way on the Save As dialog to say that this is company data, this is personal data. We're still not there. I'd love to have a mobile phone that had like I think LG had a prototype that I once saw that had a virtual phone. So you had a switch on top to change from company phone to personal phone. That would be great, but still that's something we're really fighting against. You're using like stuff like OneDrive with your mobile phone, then you're accessing emails from your company and you save them to your OneDrive because you can't share them otherwise if you're using the Adobe Reader app, you have to save it to a cloud service, blah, 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 and suddenly your data actually is all around the world. So what this does try to do is to, first of all, differentiate personal data from company data, and then make sure that if it's from a secure place, it needs to be secure all the way. So it uses techniques that stay with the file, not techniques that the user has to manually input, and not things that are off when you send them out. So there's the Save As dialog, but I don't have a picture of it. Why? I should have. VPN is changed in a whole many different ways. VPNs are kind of funny that Microsoft talks so much about VPNs because they're trying to get everyone to use direct access. But still, it seems like everyone didn't buy Enterprise. It seems that everyone didn't anyway implement direct access. So now they're talking about VPNs a lot more again, which means that you can have a policy that can say that a certain VPN can use, a certain application needs to use a VPN or is allowed to use a VPN. You can say it needs or is allowed to use certain ports, certain IP addresses, so basic firewall techniques built in. VPNs can be always on. Now that's important, but I still have one missing link here that I haven't gotten the answer from Microsoft yet, which is that there's a policy that states that this VPN is always on, meaning that whenever you open up a computer, it'll open up the VPN. Kind of a cheap way of doing direct access. But now what I don't know is I still haven't been able to execute the VPN in such an early phase that I could use computer policies, which is one of the greatest benefits of direct access, that you can actually get computer policies as well, because direct access, you know, you've seen Windows 8.1 saying waiting for workplace connectivity. That's because it's waiting to first get the direct access connection and then do policies. Now they haven't mentioned anything about this one with computer policies. Will it be in an early phase so that you can actually use computer policies or not? That I don't have an answer for. VPN clients can be installed as universal apps, and they can be done by any ISV. So VPN is no more restricted in any way. External VPNs are fine for Microsoft. They do go through the same phases of getting the application to the store. So it's a universal app. For me, the first thing when I saw this, the first thing I thought about was Windows 10 on my mobile phone finally having SSTP client, which is now lacking. I would love to use a VPN protocol that uses port 443 instead of LT2P with IPsec or even worse like PPTP. So hopefully that will again bring the computer and the phone a bit closer to each other as they can share the same VPN clients. From my perspective, the thing I'm most happy about, what I'm waiting for the most, is probably this. You remember you had Windows XP introduced software restriction policies, SRP. It didn't have a really good reputation. People didn't like it that much because it was hard to manage. It ended up many times in these 8,000 long lists. So what actually happened was that they came up with a new and better one. So if you take AppLocker and you do a policy for AppLocker, but use Process Monitor to see where the rules are written to, they're actually written to a registry key called SRPv2. So AppLocker is AppLocker only because of the old one having such a bad reputation. It's better for Microsoft to change the name so people think it's something new. It's actually SRPv2. So we might hear, when we start talking about enterprise lockdown, it might actually be like SRPv3, or it might be AppLocker v2 or v3 or something like that. But anyway, it's a fundamentally different process, because even with AppLocker, it would be a great thing if you could say that my computer here will only run software that is signed by our vendor or me. If you try to do that, what happens? The worst thing is that you can't get the ISV to sign it. You try to call them. It would be a lot easier for us to allow this with our policies if you could sign your software. That's money, 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 and they won't do it. Now you can do it for them. So what Enterprise Lockdown does, it's actually just for a set that it's only Windows 10 Enterprise feature, not for the Pro version or whatever they're going to call it. It's like AppLocker with steroids, meaning that Microsoft offers an online service for signing. So you can sign anything, including universal apps, including current modern apps, and including desktop apps for like SAP client, SAP client or something like that, SAP GUI, whatever. So it can be a desktop software as well. So you can sign your applications there, and then you have policies that you state that I will allow only software that is signed by me, is signed by Microsoft, is from the store, signed by a trusted ISV or any of these. So you can have different levels of policies on who you want to allow. But you can actually now take all the old software as well. So if you got the business critical software that's been running there since Windows 95 and you still need to support it, you can sign that. So you can actually use the things that AppLocker may be able to do even now, but you don't have support on how to get the software working, or signed mainly. So it should take the Wild Wild West out of the picture. TPM containers. TPMs are an old thing, but TPM version 2.0 with Windows 10 starts to support something called TPM containers. TPM containers kind of divides the TPM into different silos. So the TPM can have a silo for personal matters. That doesn't really need to be protected that well if you don't want to. And then it can have a silo for your enterprise data. And the enterprise data needs high requirements for security. So long PIN codes That's a kind of funny thing. We're talking about pin codes, but pin codes in Windows 10 can technically be any characters or numbers. So it means that you actually, if you have a 16 character long pin code with not a single number, is it a pin code or a password? That's a kind of a funny thought there. You might still be using passwords, but the technology is a bit different as your secrets are on the TPM and your pin code is blocking the TPM. Or locking, sorry, hopefully not blocking. I mean locking the TPM. So it's a different way of, you use keys. If you use these sort of keys, they're either from your PKI or Microsoft Windows 10 can actually self-create keys as well. Now the TPM, if it has two different levels, you can have two different policies. So you will say that you will need to have a 4-digit PIN code for your personal data, but we require a complicated 8-character PIN code for enterprise data. So different policies for different kinds of data. It's also very beneficial for destroying data from a bring your own device scenario. So you take your bring your own device machine to your work, join it to a workplace join, download stuff on your computer, and then when you get out of the company can actually just block the single silo. So now the block the single silo, which means you can't get the keys to open any of company data. So company data will effectively be on the machine, but it's just unusable. Same kind of thing that happens with workplace join. Workplace join, if you've checked it out, that also has the checkbox for encrypt company data, meaning that instead of using a user certificate to encrypt a certain file with EFS, they will actually always use a company-based certificate to secure every company user's data on the box. So when the box is no more company's box, they take the single certificate out, and no one of the company users can use the data. So it was like the old way of doing it, but now we use TPM for that. It of course can be used with Windows 10 mobile as well, so it could bring us a bit closer to this sharing company and personal data on the same mobile phone. Okay, so we already talked about, there's a few requirements for PIN codes and there's a few requirements for biometrics. So, for example, biometrics, Windows 10 can have a biometric reader, but the biometric reader has some specifications to it, so you can't get it working on all machines. I have a friend here somewhere, we were just talking about it at the speaker lounge. He showed me a machine that has a fingerprint reader, but he can't get it working. That's because it's an optical reader. So it's like the old way of taking fingerprints. It just takes a picture of your fingerprint. You will have to have these either touch-based swipe or touch-based fingerprint readers if you're going to use them. They are not to be optical only, because you probably many of you read the news just like a few months ago when they just took like, they showed it in Black Hat or somewhere. They took like 78 pictures from far away from the user's fingerprint and used that to get into the machine. That's totally possible if you allow optical readers. When you get a touch reader, you can also take into consideration all the valleys that you have between these lines. So it can be a 3D map compared to a 2D picture. And it needs to be able to detect if it's alive or not. This is something that if Andy Malone would be here, he would be rubbing his finger, telling you stories about how agents will steal your fingers anyway and stuff like that. But honestly, yeah, it might not be that. Of course, there will always be agent stories on how to take someone's finger and keep it alive and stuff like that. But basically, it does need to have some sort of circulation. So it needs to feel like alive. If you read the news a few years ago in Australia, that's the coolest thing. There were 14-year-old kids in school, and at their school, they had just taken into use fingerprint readers to make sure the students are at the classes. So you had to actually go in and swipe your fingerprint so that they know if you're attending or not. So then one of them guys figured out that you can actually use these small candy, which look like bears. I don't know what they're called here. Yeah, gummy bears. So you can use a gummy bear to authenticate into the school. So then they had gummy bears for the whole classroom, and someone was responsible for swiping in all the friends who were actually looking at a football match somewhere. So he took the gummy bears and checked everyone in. Now doctors did the same thing, and those were like real adult doctors who did the same thing in Europe with these false fingers that they produced from, I don't remember what the material was, but okay, there will be like easy ways to get it in if you don't at least check if it has circulation or not. PIN codes, this is a super funny thing, and I'm happy to have an answer for it. I don't know how many of you knew it. If you did, you should have told me in TechEd, because I got this question, and TPM before 2.0 was a wild, wild west. Every single company who had a computer with a TPM, they could do their own policies, which ended up in ridiculous things. Because you might have a Lenovo machine that you typed your PIN code 4 times wrong, and it will be locked for 24 hours. Then you can take 5 more tries, and it's 84 hours. And then you can take 5 more tries, and it's a week. Or you could get an HP machine that you really needed to type in 128 times the wrong PIN code to get it locked. So when TPM 2.0, Microsoft actually is on the board of TCG, which is responsible for the TPM. And now the TPM 2.0, there is actually a standard. So if it's 2.0 that you're using, then the rule is that it's 32 wrong guesses, and then you have to take 1 hour timeout. And then you can do 32 again. And when I actually read this, I was amazed, because I had just been on a phone with a guy from a TechEd session that was asking me that, can you believe it, but we have a computer that never locks down. It has a TPM, but it just never locks down. And after I heard this, I called him. Now we do it once more. 32 times. No, 32 times. And he did it 32 times. It didn't lock. Okay? Can you check tpm.msc, and you can find the TPM version there? Version was 1.2 or something. Okay. What brand? HP. Try it 128 times, and he almost hung up the phone. But we did get it locked. It was just that the company had actually been trying for 6 months with different paid consultants to figure out why the computer doesn't lock. But it did after 128 tries. But who would try it? If you read the young guy, 9-year-old, who cracked Windows Live on Xbox, that's superb. If you type in your password for your live account on Xbox 128 times, it lets you in. That's why I'm so jealous for my 6-year-old daughter. There are no barriers between her trying something out. I have these barriers in my head which will prevent me from trying 128 times. I can do with 24 because I've been learning Windows NT for so long that I know that Microsoft has this silly 24 last passwords remembered and stuff like that. So 24 I'll do. 50, no, probably, to be honest, at that point I would say it's secure, which is silly. Don't you think? You might have someone saying it's secure, it doesn't break. But then you have a 9-year-old who does it 128 times and gets in. Luckily, his or her father was some kind of a security expert, so he wrote a nice article about it. But that's like silly. That's why I love kids when they start doing something. You know that they actually might get it working, although I don't, because they don't give up. That's a good thing. Okay. TPM attestation is a new thing, kind of new thing. It's both partly TPM functionality and partly Windows 10 functionality, but actually gives you the ability to identify the keys themselves. So one way of bypassing TPM protection was actually to create keys that looked real, but were made by someone else than the TPM itself. So TPM attestation makes sure that the TPM keys are created by the TPM itself, and also that there might be trusted TPM vendors and stuff like that, but it's trusted. I know there's a lot of promiseware, so we'll have to wait and see. I'm also really, really anxious to get some demos. there's a huge crowd here, and I'm super happy that at least as far as I can see, most of you are still awake, even with even without a single demo, because I'm kind of anxious on presenting this if I would have something to show. But now we get screenshots and that's all. So hopefully we'll get a lot more quite quickly, because as you saw, there's a lot of stuff that Microsoft needs to execute, so people will think that they actually do work. Oop, I'm kicking these lights all the time. All right. So I would like to thank you all for joining my sessions today. Most of you joined 2, as I can see, so thank you very much for coming. Everyone, please fill in the evals. Those are the most important ways of us Finns to ever get out of our country. So thank you very much.